All right, guys, welcome. Welcome to Spoken Truth Revival. So, I was trying to do this the other day, and for some reason, the connection kind of had cut on me. So, I wanted to come back on here again to try it, to see if we can do this live thing again and see if we can get into the message that needs to be spoken. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get set up still. And we're going to be talking about two different types of topics. We're going to be talking about anger, how anger can rob us, how anger can destroy our lives if we let it continue and to wreak havoc. We're going to discuss how anger is an emotion that really is temporary, but it can cause a long-term effect if we continue and we let it, go its course without dealing with it. And then we're going to be talking about the other topic. We're going to be speaking about belief. We're going to be speaking about unbelief, our problems with when it comes to our faith, especially if we're in situations where we're trying to believe as much as we can and still we struggle with doubt. We struggle with that internal thing that happens inside of us. So it's going to be two different topics. It's not going to be long, but it's very, very important that we get into it. So let's start off with anger. Let's start off with the story that we can find in the book of Numbers. If we look in chapter 20, we go from verse 2 to 13. I'm not going to read the entire thing. But here, basically, what we find is we find Moses and the congregation of Israel after almost 40 years in the desert. They're pretty much at the long stretch. And you can imagine these people are just feeling it already. Moses is already feeling it. 40 years of complaining, 40 years of rebellion, 40 years of just continue murmuring and all kinds of things. There's no water. It's hot. The animals need, some type of, they need something, right? So the congregation comes to Moses and they ask Moses, look, we're thirsty. What can we do here? We need some water. So if we look here, Moses goes, right? And he takes his brother Aaron and he goes to the tabernacle and he goes and he talks to God, prays to God. Hey, what can we do? God gives him a specific command. God tells him, I want you to go take the rod with you, but I want you to go and speak to the rock, not strike it. See, the first time before this, he struck the rock. That was the command he was given. But see, on the second command, he was given the commandment of speaking to the rock. So he goes over there, and if you know the story, anger, the people still complaining, still going, in their ways. And I could imagine that already Moses already fired him. Moses already done with it. I can't deal with this no more. And he lets his emotions come out. And he lets his emotions start taking over. And he loses it. So he stands up and he tells the people of Israel, I'm going to find it right here. And let me see here. And Moses, like I said, tells these people, he says, listen now, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock? Then Moses raises his hand and boom, strikes the rock. And not once, he strikes it twice. He strikes the rock twice. So already in that anger, already in that type of rage. And before I go further into the lesson, I want to give a little short testimony of anger. I myself have dealt with anger for such a long time. I've been through it in and out. And it's the testimony that I have that I've recognized how my anger has caused, a lot of confliction in relationships, a lot of conflictions in my immediate relationships, conflictions with my family, with others, because, my father used to call me a big lighter, just like that. He used to say that it just took me one flick and I would set off a whole wildfire. And anger has been something that I've been battling for years, for a long, long, long time. But I can't really say that I don't deal with it, but it's something that has always been there, right? So if we look at anger, what does the Bible say concerning that anger? If we look in James 1:20 says, "For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So we have to understand that in our anger, whenever we get like that, right? And especially if we're being asked, like Moses was, being asked to do something in obedience, in our anger, if we act out in that anger, it does not produce the righteousness of God. Even in a leadership position as Moses was in, and a lot of us being head of the family, whatever the case is, when we're in that type of leadership position, our obedience is something that is very, very important. But when we act out, and that acting out, it doesn't do any good for us. And like I said, does not produce that righteousness of God. Another verse I have here is Ephesians 4:26 and 27. It says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil." Now, if you notice, he says, "Be angry." It's okay to feel that emotion. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to be in that type of energy, if you want to call it that, but don't let the sun go down. You be angry, you do what it needs, but then you have to deal with it, because if you don't deal with it, it's going to deal with you. So be angry, as he says in Ephesians, Paul is saying, but he says, do not let the sun go down. Do not give an opportunity for the devil to be able to come in and cause more friction and to be cause more harm into your life. So in that anger, it's hard for us to think straight. It's hard for us to gather a thought. It's hard for us to really put two and two together when we're in that motion. And I know that from experience, you know, and looking at the story here, how Moses was feeling, how Moses was, you know, I've been dealing with this for so long, for 40 years. And I can feel this man's pressure. I could feel the tension. I could feel exactly what he was going through in that specific moment. I've been there. But the thing is that in that type of mind frame, if you want to call it that, that's when we have to step back and understand. Because as we already saw in James, the anger of man, it doesn't produce the righteousness of God. So if we are called to lead, and especially if we are called to, let's say in the church setting, in our family setting, anger is such a disease that, you know, if we let it just spiral up, it's going to cause more damage than anything else that we have there. So how can anger rob us? Anger can rob us in a lot of different ways, right? In this story right here, it robbed Moses of being able to go into the promised land. His anger, his emotion, the emotion that he felt right there at the moment cost him that dearly thing, you know? And it's like, if we look into our lives, what is our rock, right? What is the emotion? What do we have going on in our lives, right? That we sometimes lose it, or there's a trigger factor for us, and being careful in that. So one of the points we have here is how anger can rob us is anger clouds the judgment. I went over this a little bit. When you're in that mind frame of being angry, and you are angry, right? And you are there, it clouds all kinds of judgment. You know, you can sit there and that might not even be the real you, but when you get to that type of level, right? And especially if you get hot. I've been known that when I have gotten back in the past, when I've gotten angry, and I mean angry, like all hell broke loose. I was breaking things. I throw stuff. It didn't even matter. I was just losing it at the moment. It clouded my judgment because then soon after that, because I remember when I was a child, my mother used to tell me this that, and I remember little bits and pieces of it, but I would say whatever I say in a rash, and oh, okay, you this now, whatever case is, and not even about a couple minutes later, I will come back and I will apologize. But in that split moment, it clouded my judgment in making the correct decision, just like it did Moses here. In that moment, in that anger, it clouded his judgment. He forgot exactly what God had told him to do. God expected Moses to do this, right? And even if you look at the story, right, God, it's kind of like, it's weird because kind of like God knew what was going to happen, at least the way I look at it, because God gave him this command of going, I want you to speak to the rock, Moses, right? Aaron heard it. I want you to speak to this rock. And at the same time he tells him to speak to the rock, he tells him, take the rod. Take the rod with you. And it's like, if you told him to speak to the rock, why did you tell him to take the rod? Because it's like God knew, right? Sometimes we are put to the test. Sometimes we are put to that test to see what we can do. And it's only to benefit us. And it's only to elevate us in that, right? So sometimes I believe we're tested in that level, kind of like what happened here with Moses, is my opinion. But if we look at the second point, anger can break what we spent years building. Anger can break what we spent years in building. You can go 10, 20 years, whatever, how long it is, so Moses here, and be doing good. You're following orders. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You're going to work. You're the provider. You're providing for your family. You're taking care of your wife. You're taking care of your children. You're taking care of this. And all you need is a spark. And all of a sudden, a spark happens in your life. All right? And as soon as that spark happens, the judgment goes. It clouds your judgment. That anger just ignites a fire. And then that fire is a consuming fire that will consume everything around you, just like it did with Moses here. So anger can rob us of so much if we don't control it. If we don't learn how to control that specific emotion the best way that we can. On our third point, we have anger turns a temporary emotion into a permanent consequence. I just went over that a little bit. I kind of went into it. Anger can turn a temporary situation into a permanent consequence. Think about that real quick. Whenever I've lashed out, it could have been something so little. So I was having a bad day. I was, whatever the case is, and all of a sudden I had a moment and I flipped down a moment, and it causes such a ripple effect. I remember when my son had passed away that I was in this bitterness. I was dealing with a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and I was just spewing things out of my mouth, just because I was angry and I knew I was angry. It clouded my judgment. I wasn't even thinking, but when my son had passed, it was just something that was so deep. And that anger was just something that I really didn't know how to control at the time. So I was saying things and I was doing things. And now that I sit back and actually giving this lesson here, it's like, man, it caused some permanent consequences in my life that now I'm trying to fix them. And it's hard to fix them now. Because see, some people, they don't really understand your work earning. So they don't understand that. They only see what happened there and they're stuck in that moment. And I don't blame them, because stuff that I said, stuff that I've done, stuff that has happened, and I should have been more in control of those emotions or seek help or whatever the case is, but I should have done that. So that's a very important point there to understand. Anger speaks loud, and it keeps us from hearing God's voice. I hit that a little bit on my book that I wrote, Force Through Fire. How in the middle of my grief was so loud. Anger is another emotion. Your anger, that emotion you have so deep inside, can be such a rage and cause so much of a noise, and the clanging and the bah, and then you don't hear God's voice, trying to calm you, to that whisper, trying to whisper things in you and saying, hey, it's okay, relax, and trying to point you out, trying to bring you out of that state of mind, but you're so engulfed in that anger, and yet again, looking at Moses here, that I believe that in this specific situation, it wasn't like God was watching Moses do this. I believe that God was whispering things to him, but his rage, his anger was so loud that he couldn't hear the voice of reason. He couldn't hear the voice of God because he acted out in that selfish ambition. How we get when we get angry, because some of y'all know that when we get angry, we're not thinking about nobody else. It's just us in the moment, and we just everything goes to wherever it goes to, and that's it. We focus on numero uno. So I believe that, and I believe that's what happened there. Our fifth point on this one here is uncontrolled anger doesn't just cost, it affects those around us. I hit that point too. It doesn't just affect us, guys. Anger does not just affect us. Anger causes a lot of damage. Staying in that type of emotion, that type of energy, will cost you so much if you just stay there. In Moses' situation, it cost him entry into the promised land. Now some can say one thing, that maybe he didn't care. I know he did care. 20, 40 years, whatever the case is, that's been the whole thing. He's already of old age, and he fulfilled. He did. Remember this right here, guys. Moses did a lot. Moses led the people of Egypt, the people of Israel, out of Egypt. He followed every commandment of God. He did everything he was supposed to do. He was a leader. Moses had a lot of anger issues, from what I can see. Moses had a lot of anger issues, and something that if he would have dealt with, probably would have turned out different for him. But in a split moment, everything that he did and everything that he did for God and all his obedience at that time, it took one act of action for him to lose everything. Anger is such an important thing that we need to get a hold of. Anger, if you do not get a hold of that emotion, it will stop you from processing. It will stop you from, if you're on a healing journey, what I talk a lot about, by going down this healing journey, it will stop you from these moments. It will stop you from enjoying life because you're so into whatever is raging inside of you, the war that's raging inside of your spirit. And God wants you to let go of it. God wants you to let go of that storm. God wants you to hand it over to him and to, take a chill pill. Take a chill pill, because anger, uncontrolled anger, untamed anger, will cause a lifetime of problems. The Bible, so many proverbs and so many different areas. Even when I was looking up about anger, what does the Bible say about anger? There's so much about it, in the Bible, because that emotion right there can cause so much problems. So much.